I've asked a special guest to tell me their favourite things about a chosen Doctor Who story. I'm Toby Hadoke, and this is Happy Times and Places.
Hello, my name's Daragh Carville. I'm a playwright and screenwriter. I'm the creator of the ITV crime drama The Bay. And the Doctor Who story I'd like Toby to look at is Kinda. Now, Kinda for me is one of the jewels in the crown of Doctor Who. It's a beautiful stained glass window of a story, especially I think in terms of both the writing and the performances. And it's of special kind of personal significance for me because after I watched this story for the first time in 1982, when I was 13, I got together with some friends, some fellow Doctor Who fans, and we started a fanzine called Kinda. So Kinda was one of the things that sort of set me on the path of writing, so I owe it a lot. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the things I love about this story, taking it episode by episode.
Well, welcome to my home and to this slightly terrifying edition of Happy Times and Places, in which I have to accentuate the positive of a story which is very, very highly thought of, and by me as well, but also, unfortunately for me, it's also the story that is chosen by all sorts of clever people for clever reasons, and annoyingly, one of those clever people who you've just met, Daragh Carville, currently riding high from the success of The Bay, which is on as we speak, as I record this. So thanks to Daragh. As I say, I'm slightly nervous about this, but let's see how we do, hey? Let's see how we do. I'm expecting him to come up with all sorts of clever reasons, whilst mine will be a bit lame and potentially a bit dim. So here we go. I have it on DVD. I actually have it on Blu-ray. Why am I watching the DVD? It'll probably be better quality on the Blu-ray, won't it? I'd forgotten I had the Blu-ray, if I'm all honest. So I have the DVD, and I'm going to press play now. So, welcome everybody. This is Kinda, the third story in Peter Davison's reign, the third one to be recorded and the third one to be shown, although his first story was recorded after this, because they went 4 to Doomsday, The Visitation, then Kinda in recording order, and in broadcast order, Castrovalva, 4 to Doomsday, and this one, Kinda. I'm not a... I know I've got to accentuate the positive. I'm not a fan of the one-word titles. I'd have preferred it to be called Paradise of Doom or something. This is my stuff that I watched when I was younger. I love these opening scenes between... what a cast. I mean, it's inevitable some or one or all of the cast are going to get a mention as we go along here. But this is Richard Todd. I think the only classic series Oscar nominee, acting nominee. He was nominated for The Hasty Heart opposite Ronald Reagan, who was never nominated for an Oscar but did achieve higher purpose. He plays us in The Hasty Heart. He plays a Scottish soldier who is terminally ill and is brash and doesn't make friends, and actually learns that you can make friends. He's a fine and he was a film star, Richard Todd. And I remember him being all over the papers when this was on. You know, this was John Nathan Turner's guest starring policy flowering. I didn't know who he was. I did know Nerys Hughes, but Richard Todd was certainly known to the adults in my in the environs I inhabited. Good move to, if you've got too many companions, rather than shoehorn them into a story like in The Underwater Menace, when there's lots of, where do we go now, Doctor? Aye, where? Yes, tell us, Doctor. All of that. To go and have a snooze. So Sarah Sutton, with whom I was very much in love at this time. What's this? I was 6 when this was on. 7. 7 when this was on. So I had no means of declaring my love, and had I had the means, probably no means of demonstrating it, but nonetheless. Now, the jungle set in this gets a lot of stick, I think, just the very fact that they attempted a jungle in the studio. On the evidence of that, it's actually a very decent set. It's the problem that you can't ever light it so that it looks like a jungle, because obviously if you're in a jungle you have shadows and light streaming through various bits and darkness draped over other bits, and it would be a lighting nightmare. I love the dynamic in the dome, and Richard Todd is perfectly cast as the commanding officer. He's a particular type, but that helps us ground it in a sort of reality. A reality, but it's very much a screen reality. He's very much a sort of type that we know, whereas Nerys Hughes, I think, is absolutely brilliant in this. She was well known to us for comedy and was the district nurse at this point, but she was certainly a ubiquitous TV face. But I think she's so good in this, with The Hardest Job. And here's Simon Rouse, who would end up cropping up in everything. He started cropping up in Bread and this bits and bobs and various bits and bobs before becoming Jack Meadows in The Bill, who was a sort of semi-regular who used to come in and yell at people because he was the one that investigated dodgy police. And then he became a regular fixture. And in fact, I think got the last speech in the last episode of The Bill, because he was considered, I think he was the longest serving, certainly the most senior sort of cast member. And Jack Meadows is a great TV policeman, and Simon Rouse is a very good actor, and he's very, very good in this. They're giant wind chimes. I'm in a place called Chorlton in Manchester. These wind chimes would make you king of Chorlton. It's that kind of place. If there's a pile of the Guardians behind that bush and a hummus stall round the corner and perhaps a yoga cafe, the planet of the Kinder is very Chorlton. This is very. Press ups are actually really hard. Here we have Richard Todd, who's no spring chicken, but look how strong he is. He was very much, I suspect, a very outdoor rugger sort of chap. I've done a podcast about his war service, because he's the only person. Well, no, he might not be the only person, but he's in a film where he talks to himself. He's playing his own sort of commanding officer, and this other chap comes to talk to him to get orders, and that other chap is sort of the role that Todd took in real life on D-Day. He fought on D-Day. A couple of dozen parsecs off home world is everything about why Richard Todd is perfect for this, because he's basically a colonial, and that's the subtext there. This is the sort of British Empire doing what it does, going and interfering, often led by very a particular type of British officer. And in these sorts of stories, Earth means British. But you also have to make it spacey and sciencey, because it's Doctor Who. And to have Todd saying parsecs off home world, so you've got a parsec, which is a spacey thing, and then off, which is a very old-fashioned way of saying off, but absolutely in the type of those senior sort of army officers. It's where those two things don't clash, they melt, they come together to show what the story is doing and why the casting helps with that. And I think it's delightful, and I think it's great that they've chosen to, him to do that sort of exercising while he's doing it, because it keeps the sort of expositional stuff and the scene setting very interesting. I distinctly remember this. So much of this I remember from when it was first on. I very much remember the camera going into Tegan's eye. Oh, which it hasn't done now, but it will do. I didn't follow the story at all as a 7-year-old. I note that this story, which is now considered a high watermark in scripting of Doctor Who, especially by the clever people, came bottom of the Doctor Who Doctor Who magazine poll. Put that in context. It came lower than 4 to Doomsday, and lower than Time Flight. And I think there's the snake in part 4 is perhaps one reason, because they say leave them wanting more. Not leave them with an image of a big pink snake. Here, this child at the front wielding an apple with a suggestion that he's he's holding 3 apples in one hand, which just goes to show that future movie star Johnny Lee Miller had got apple acting down to a T, even at the tender young age. Yes, if you didn't know that already, that little boy, the one at the front, walking at the front there, is Johnny Lee Miller, off of Elementary and Trainspotting, and all sorts of things. He's back in picture now, just to the left, and wandering off. There he is. Well done, Johnny Lee Miller. This actually has quite I know it's got quite the cast on paper. Richard Todd, Nerys Hughes, Mary Morris in the next episode, Simon Rouse. But also, Johnny Lee Miller is not the only illustrious extra that we will see, and I will try to point them out, whilst other podcasters may well be going, well, the thing about the Buddhism subtext in this particular scene, I'll be going, that extra was in London's Burning. They do not. This is nice, keeping it interesting stuff. This is just a slightly slow prop advancing on them, but Davison gives it a danger, gives it an urgency, and it just it keeps a story that has quite a lot of conversation and quite a lot of static in it, and where a lot of the threat is sort of simmering danger. It keeps it keeps the jeopardy rolling. That's Davison's superb. That's great with him pointing at the gun, because he's unlike Troughton, who sort of often feigns or is actively scared. Davison actually has a sort of a bit of authority that he projects through that innocent and sometimes slightly quizzical and sometimes slightly alarmed facade. There's a little bit of a look, don't mess, where this sort of bonhomie, this breezy bonhomie, and he does it again here, doesn't he? Look, if we turn out to be hostile, then fair enough. See, that is so good. I mean, this is a young man as well, and yet he projects a wisdom and an authority beyond that very pleasant open face of his. He's not a craggy character actor, but he's got a lot of hidden depth. This is the stuff I remember. I haven't even mentioned Peter Grimwade, who is definitely in the upper echelons of 80s directors, and I mean the work he does on Earthshock. An action movie on Doctor Who Studio Day is exceptional, but this is a different kind of story, and yet he still brings his very sharp storytelling skills, keeping the atmosphere, and also getting good performances out of his cast. I've seen, when I had this on video, I got it quite late, actually, because I was in no particular hurry to get it, because I'd remembered it as being, well, there's a madman in a dome and a bad snake and some boring savages, and okay, there's the not even boring savages, boring tribes people, and okay, yeah, there's the spooky dream stuff that I think is probably quite good, but I didn't vote in the Doctor Who magazine poll, but I suspect at the time, there were other things grabbing headlines for me, and they would have been Earthshock and Visitation, the more traditional stories. Now, of course, as a grown-up, I absolutely embrace this. I think it's smart and clever and compelling, and trying to do something so interesting within the confines of Doctor Who, and it works. It works as a Doctor Who story. The sort of base commander going mad is very much a Doctor Who trope, but this makes it, well, one, this does it with a superb central performance of that base. Well, he's not the commander either. He's somebody who is given authority to make a man of him, and ends up embodying the folly of that sort of behaviour. But it was a story I was not in a particular hurry to get, so I got it quite late after a few people had said, "Oh no, Kinder's the best script Doctor Who's ever had," and I go, "Oh really? Okay." I knew it had a cast that interested me. Again, that I sort of discovered later, but apart from the obvious ones. Extra spotting galore here. So we'll come back to the chess players, because these two Kinder prisoners are perennial extras. Barney Lawrence, who's also Dave Clifford in... Is it Dave Clifford? Dave Coulshaw? Angela Clifford and Dave Coulshaw in Time Flight, but he's a marshman. He's quite a few monsters, Barney Lawrence. But the other one is Mike Mungarvin, who... is the sort of Pat Gorman of the 80s, really. He's the trooper who gets attacked by the Dalek in Resurrection of the Daleks. He is a Dalek in Destiny of the Daleks. He gets a line in Trial of a Time Lord as duty officer, so he's actually a credited cast member on that occasion. But he's also Howard Harvey, the investigative journalist in Doomlord in the Eagle comic. So he's had quite an interesting career as Mike Mungarvin. He's one to spot. But this is Anna Wing, Lou Beale from EastEnders, playing chess with Roger Milner, who was a great character actor, often played sort of vicars and things like that, who lived in Ludlow, where I was from. My brother was at school with Richard Milner, who was the son of Roger Milner. So I always felt like I'd sort of met him, even though I never did, and he's dead now. But yeah, he was sort of Ludlow's actor, Roger Milner. So and Jeff Stewart, another alumnus of the bill. Jeff Stewart as Ducker, who I remember quite well from watching this at the time. He seemed like a sort of charismatic nightmare creature. He's a bit more biting and spiteful now than I remember him being at the time, but it's a great look, and he's very different to PC Reg Hollis, who, if you've not seen the Bill, is one of the great Bill characters. He's sort of very ploddy, pedantic, weaselly sort of copper. Great character, great, like Simon Rouse's DCI Jack Meadows, but very different. They are both definitive depictions of a certain type of policeman. I think he's quite a character, Jeff Stewart. I might see if some of the things I know about him are actually out there in the public domain before episode 2. But the light. But this is great, because this is not usual for Doctor Who, and the chess players, are they there? So this is Tegan's subconscious, the chess players representing Tegan and Adric, and then you've got those two who are in Tegan's mind. You've got these two prisoners here who are in their own cage. Tegan is in her own mind with the box in the corner. There's a whole load that's cut. That's the thing. I had this on VHS late, and when I got it, it was episode 1, 3, 4, and then 2. And I sometimes used to go, can I be bothered for fast forwarding and going back? So I quite often watch it out of order. But there's a whole load of stuff cut about them not being able to eat the food, so the eating of the apple. Oh, the apple is very symbolic. Apples become quite important. But actually, the way that they play out the "we shouldn't be eating apples" thing, and Hindle's reaction to them eating apples, you know from what's in this episode, it's done. There's enough there to say, okay, they shouldn't be eating the natural products of Diva Loca. But there's a lot more of it, and actually there's a lot more of Sanders. Richard Todd, who I think must have cost quite a lot of money, has quite a lot of his stuff cut, and he's much more horrible to Hindle. I mean, he's a bit stuffy in this, and a bit and slightly bullish, but he's an active bully, I would say, in the original cut of episode 1. That's yes, because I had episodes 1, 3, 4, and then 2, and then a bit later on I got the extended cuts of episode 1 and 2 with the time code on, and was pleased that there was more interplay between the people in the dome, who I think are very interesting characters. But I actually think I don't think it really loses anything and actually gains from the tightening up. I don't like seeing Richard Todd being a more unpleasant version of Sanders, actually, although I suppose it does make his change starker, because sort of bluff to sort of genial and childish is not such a distance travelled as the sort of bullish character that we get in the full cut. An apple a day keeps that's very witty. This is great. I mean, he really commits to this, Simon Rouse, and it's hard because you can't look good doing madness, and you can look really, really bad. And of course, I say madness in inverted commas in sort of TV terms. And he does rant in places, but he gets away with it because he dilutes it with the smaller moments. I think he'd probably say now, and if it was, and if it was done on film. See, if this was done on film, you could act almost for each shot, and you do have continuity, of course, of performance, but the continuity comes in subtler moves because you can flick from one small movement to another in a way that in a sort of multi-camera studio thing you can't. You have to be a bit more fluid in your changes. So I think he negotiates that really well, and I think you would perhaps have a few quieter moments if this was more of a filmic exercise. But I think he does a terrific job, and I do like all of these characters within the dome. But as I say, I wasn't quite. I have to say, I wasn't quite sure what was going on as a kid. Now, what do we say about that? Do we say that therefore it's not doing its job? But it didn't matter because I love Doctor Who anyway. I mean, when I say I found this a bit, a bit slightly dull and confusing, that's only, everything's relative. It was still Doctor Who. It was still the most amazing and magical part of the week. But I think, for me, I think that's a great shot, and that snake piece of music, and he's beautifully lit, and he looks very creepy. He's like a sort of nightmarish harlequin, and the makeup that he's got there that accentuates the lighting. It's very, very well done. So this idea of the mirror capturing their souls and the suggestion that there's a bit of psychic powers going on, and of course we've got the what is it, the double helix in the necklace that suggests that they are much more advanced than appearances would suggest. And the clever idea of what do we consider advanced, and actually if their way of life that has stripped away all of the advancements for a simpler way, more communal with nature, is the safer one, because it keeps us away from the all the dark things that spring up in your mind in a modern way of life. Actually, as I'm saying it out loud, is actually more profound to me now in this time of, I'm recording this during lockdown. There's been an announcement today that suggests we might be on our way out. So perhaps you're listening to this in the future, where we're all gallivanting about, licking each other's eyes and touching handrails and all of that sort of business. But as I record this, the roadmap has only just been drawn, but there's a couple of elements of this. That one about the slightly simpler life and stripping away, consciously slipping away technology and advancement, again in inverted commas, but also the aspects of mental health, the aspects of being cooped up. I haven't actually mind being cooped up particularly, but I certainly identify with the mental health pressures of modern life, which sort of Hindle is undergoing in his own way, that Sanders copes with in a different way, to put him in charge, to make a man of him. Those sort of old-fashioned views of how we deal with fragile people. And now, of course, the debate is whether we go too far the other way and show too much. We are too indulgent of fragility. My instinct tells me that's the nicer way to be, but I don't know. Now, it's the only bit I love this cliffhanger. It's great in almost every regard. I just wish that gun was heavier and smaller. It's slightly too light. You can see it's not very heavy, and it's slightly too comically large. It's like a projector. And if I had my time again, I would go and paint out every image of those guns and replace them with a smaller, niftier one. Because that's the sort of traditional man waves gun at the Doctor, but with added sort of psychosis, genuine psychosis. I love the fact that the guest cast get credited before the companions. I don't know why. I love the companions, but I love the fact that they go, no, we, the companions, you've got the regular contract, but we've got some serious guest stars here. I always thought it was quite confusing that there was that Nerys Hughes played Todd, and there was sort of Todd on her chair, but Richard Todd was in it too, and it was like, I wonder if that was a way of wooing Richard Todd. You say, well, you'll get your own chair with your name on it as well. But it's very, very clever that there's so much going on. The one thing I'd worried about, which was the jungle, I actually think the jungle's it's a very good design. Malcolm Thornton was a good designer. But it's always going to look like a studio. Now, I can live with that because I speak a lingo. I was brought up with Doctor Who on a made videotaped in a studio. I suspect it would look to a modern audience like a load of people standing in front of pot plants, but I actually think that jungle set's pretty decent. It's the lighting that's the problem, and that's not a criticism of the lighting director. That's impossible to light to make look like a jungle and work, to be visible, to tell the story. I think it's very good. I think I'm going to have to because I'm going to have to be quite clever with this. Not in terms of going, the Buddhist subtext of that, because I'm not sure I can articulate that. I mean in what and when I choose what. So I'm going to say, because if I choose something now that he then chooses in 3 episodes' time, I win that point because I've got there first. So I'm going to say, because we're trying to do things that are specific to each episode, but some of those things will cross episodes. And do you go Simon Rouse as Hindle? He's got finer moments later. Do you say Richard? I mean, almost every performance in this you could single out. So I'm going to say, to cover all of that, I'm going to say the guest cast, because it's an extremely strong guest cast. I think it would be a disservice to Nerys Hughes to pick Simon Rouse. I think it would be a disservice to Simon Rouse to pick out... I mean, Mary Morris next week is absolutely fantastic. Richard Todd, movie star. I actually think he has his part gets less interesting as it goes on, but it sort of needs to. But it needs that presence to be diluted. And as I say, he did have quite a lot of good stuff cut in episode 1. But yes, please, the guest cast is my choice. So let's see what Daragh has chosen for episode 1.
So in episode 1, this is really one of the first Doctor Who stories that really explores and accesses the world through the eyes of the companion. This is something that we see later with characters like Ace and Rose, and it's become one of the mainstays of the modern show. But this is one of the first times we see it through the journey of Tegan into the dark places of the inside.
So the dark places of the inside, the companion's point of view. He's a writer, you see. I suppose I'm a writer as well, but I often forget that. See, these things, one is supposed to... It's a podcast. This is supposed to be an advertisement for my skills. I'm a Sony Award-nominated writer. I'm somebody who's written some stuff and sort of got away with it. Daragh has a television series and all sorts. But that's very the companion's point of view. It is quite modern in that regard, isn't it? I think the other thing I potentially would have chosen, I wouldn't have gone from that, although it's a very good observation. I might have gone for the dream sequences just because I found them so stark and memorable, and because they're so unusual. And they aren't in the next episode as much. Again, a lot of those were cut. Episodes 1 and 2 overrun quite seriously, and then episode 4, as we shall see, suddenly has a couple of scenes that come from nowhere of Tegan and Adric. Well, we will see. So I don't get a point for that. I think that's a really interesting perspective that Daragh has chosen, which means that he is currently winning 1-0, and he does have the power of life and death over me in this podcast. So I'm feeling slightly under threat from his intellect and his writer's grasp of all things televisual. So let's see if he makes complete mincemeat of me, and I have to retreat to the dark places of my insides. But thank you for joining me for episode 1 of Kinder. I hope this does reach you when we're closer to that glimmer at the end of the tunnel that has been announced today, and that wherever you are wherever you are is a time and a place that is very, very happy. For now, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Ta-ta. Thank you so much for downloading and listening to this latest episode of Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest this time around is Daragh Carville. Please follow him on Twitter at Daragh Carville, DARAHCARVILLE. He is a fascinating fellow and an extremely successful scriptwriter, and I'm rather humbled and very lucky to have him. I'm also lucky to have people subscribing to my Patreon page, the latest of whom are David Brodie, Richard Chalk, Charles Coffin, Rossa McPhillips, Justin E. Monaghan, Dave Owen, Peter Reed, and not forgetting Ruben Herfindahl. The music for this podcast is by Dave Gates, and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. I'm grateful to anybody who sees fit to fund my nonsense, but if you're so inclined, you can do so at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. You get your name in the credits now and again, but you also get early access to podcasts and some exclusive material. There's also the chance to just do a one-off payment if that's more your style at ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. But I know times are tight financially, and I just appreciate you listening, to be honest, but spreading the word costs you nothing. So if you'd like to give this a 5-star rating or positive reviews at any podcast outlet that you can, then please do so, because that would really help, and I'd be extremely grateful. Don't forget to subscribe to the official Toby Hadoke YouTube channel, and you can also follow my stand-up comedy night Excess Malarkey at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey every Tuesday at 8 p.m. GMT, and that's me doing a bit of comedy and introducing some of the finest stand-ups from the circuit.